The gravel crunched beneath her bare feet as she stumbled down the empty highway, each step sending sharp stones cutting into her tender soles. Blood trickled from a split lip and her left eye was swollen nearly shut, painting the world in a haze of purple and black. The cotton sundress she wore, once yellow like summer sunshine, was now torn at the shoulder and stained with evidence of the violence she'd finally escaped. Emma Rodriguez clutched a small canvas bag to her chest, everything she owned in the world reduced to a few photographs, $27 in crumpled bills, and the wedding ring she hadn't yet found the courage to remove. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Montana highway stretched endlessly in both directions, surrounded by rolling hills that seemed to mock her isolation. She had been walking for hours, maybe days. Time had lost all meaning since she'd crawled through that bathroom window while Derek was passed out drunk on their kitchen floor. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains when she saw it, a weathered wooden sign that read Copper Creek Ranch 2 miles. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, threatening to give out entirely, but something deep in her chest whispered that she had to keep moving. Behind her lay a life of fear, of tiptoeing around a man whose love had slowly transformed into possession, then control, then rage. Ahead lay uncertainty, but uncertainty felt like freedom compared to the prison she'd left behind. The ranch appeared gradually, first as distant buildings shimmering in the heat, then as a collection of weathered structures nestled in a valley where cottonwoods lined a meandering creek. Split rail fences contained horses that lifted their heads to watch her approach, their ears pricked forward with curiosity rather than alarm. The main house was modest but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and window boxes that overflowed with late-season wildflowers. Emma paused at the gate, her hand resting on the sun-warmed metal. What was she doing? She had no plan beyond putting distance between herself and Derek, no idea what she would say to whoever lived here. The rational part of her mind screamed that she should turn around, find the nearest town, call someone for help, but her body refused to take another step backward, as if some invisible force was pulling her forward. That's when she saw him. Marcus Sullivan was replacing a broken board on the corral fence when the woman appeared at his gate. At 35 he had spent the better part of 2 decades learning to read trouble from a distance, and everything about this stranger radiated distress. Her posture spoke of someone trying to make herself invisible, shoulders curved inward, head down. But it was the way she moved, careful, deliberate, like someone accustomed to avoiding sudden movements, that made him set down his hammer and walk slowly toward the gate. "Ma'am," he called out when he was still several yards away, keeping his voice low and non-threatening. "You okay out there?" Emma's head snapped up, revealing the full extent of her injuries. Marcus felt his jaw tighten involuntarily. He had seen domestic violence before, his own mother had worn similar marks when he was a child, and the sight of this woman's battered face awakened something fierce and protective in his chest. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, taking a step backward. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I was just walking and saw your sign and I thought maybe." Her voice trailed off as if she realized how foolish she sounded. Marcus opened the gate slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. "No bother at all. Looks like you could use some water and maybe a place to sit for a spell." He gestured toward the porch without moving closer to her. "Name's Marcus Sullivan. This is my place." "Emma," she replied, then immediately looked like she regretted giving her real name. "Well, Emma, why don't you come on up to the porch? I've got some sweet tea in the fridge and a first aid kit that's seen some use." Marcus turned and walked toward the house, not looking back to see if she followed. He had learned from working with skittish horses that sometimes the best way to gain trust was to show you weren't a threat by not pushing too hard. The porch was shaded and welcoming, with comfortable chairs and the gentle sound of wind chimes stirring in the afternoon breeze. Emma sank into a rocking chair, her body finally allowing itself to rest. Marcus disappeared inside and returned with a tall glass of iced tea and a white plastic box marked with a red cross. "This might sting a little," he said, dampening a clean cloth with antiseptic, "but that cut on your lip needs attention before it gets infected." Emma flinched when he raised his hand, an automatic response that made Marcus pause. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, "but if you'd rather clean it yourself, that's fine too." The gentleness in his voice, so different from what she had grown accustomed to, brought tears to Emma's eyes. She nodded and tilted her face toward him, allowing him to carefully clean the wound. His touch was professional, practiced, like someone who had tended injuries before. "You're good at this," Emma observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Had some practice," Marcus replied, focusing on his work. Used to be a paramedic before I inherited this place from my grandfather.
Old habits die hard.
As he worked, Emma studied his face. Marcus had kind eyes, the color of coffee with cream, and laugh lines that suggested he smiled often despite the serious expression he wore now. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray at the temples, and his hands were steady and sure. There was something solid about him, like the mountains that surrounded his valley, enduring and unshakable. "There," he said, stepping back to examine his work. "That should heal up clean if you keep it dry for a day or two." Emma touched the bandage gently. "Thank you. I should go now. I've imposed enough." "Go where?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair
Beside hers.
The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. Emma realized she didn't have an answer. In her desperation to escape, she hadn't thought beyond putting one foot in front of the other. "I don't know," she admitted. "Somewhere. Somewhere.
Can wait until morning."
Marcus said matter-of-factly. "It's getting dark, and these mountain roads aren't safe for walking at night. Plenty of wild animals looking for an easy meal, and the temperature drops fast once the sun goes down. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." Marcus's tone was firm but not unkind. "There's a guest room in the house, clean sheets, hot shower if you want one. No strings, no expectations, just a safe place to sleep, and a hot meal." Emma wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. The thought of a real bed, of being truly safe for one night, was almost overwhelming. But accepting help meant trusting, and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "You don't even know me. I could be anyone." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle in the distance. "My grandfather used to say that character isn't revealed by what a person has, but by what they do when they have nothing left to lose." He turned to look at her directly. "You walked miles on bare feet rather than stay wherever you came from. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The simple acceptance in his words broke something open in Emma's chest. She had spent so many years being told she was worthless, crazy, the cause of every problem in her marriage. To have a stranger look at her worst moment and see something worthy of respect was almost incomprehensible. "I don't have any money to pay you," she said, tears threatening again. "Didn't ask for any." Marcus stood and extended. "Come on, let's get you settled in. Come on, let's get you settled in before it gets too dark." The guest room was small but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains that fluttered in the evening breeze. Marcus showed her where the towels were kept, how to work the shower, and left a clean t-shirt and pair of sweatpants on the dresser. "They'll be too big," he said apologetically, "but they're clean and comfortable. If you're hungry, I've got stew on the stove. Help yourself to whatever you need." After he left, Emma stood in the center of the room for several minutes, afraid to touch anything, afraid to believe this was real. The house around her was quiet, except for the settling sounds of old wood and the distant lowing of cattle. It was the kind of quiet she had forgotten existed, peaceful rather than ominous, the silence of safety rather than the held breath before violence. The shower was a revelation. Hot water poured over her aching body, washing away the dust and fear of the road. She stood under the spray until the water began to cool, watching the grime of her old life swirl down the drain. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that smelled of sunshine and detergent, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. The bruises were stark against her pale skin, but her eyes held something they had. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus's clothes swallowed her small frame, but they were soft and warm. She rolled up the sleeves and pant legs and padded barefoot to the kitchen, drawn by the rich aroma of beef stew and fresh bread. Marcus was reading at the kitchen table, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Feel better, much thank you." Emma hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "You said something about stew." "Right there on the stove. Bowls are in the cabinet above the sink. There's cornbread too if you're interested." Emma served herself a modest portion, her stomach cramping with hunger she had been ignoring. She had barely eaten in the 3 days before her escape, too nervous and afraid to keep anything down. Now in the safety of Marcus's kitchen, her body was finally ready to accept nourishment. The stew was rich and flavorful, with tender chunks of beef and vegetables that had been slow-cooked to perfection. Emma ate slowly,
savoring each bite, aware that Marcus was watching her with the same careful attention he might give to an injured animal. "It's delicious," she said when she noticed his scrutiny. "Thank you, my grandmother's recipe," Marcus replied. "She always said food was love made visible." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was. Raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, taught me everything I know about ranching, cooking, and treating people with kindness." Marcus closed his book and removed his glasses. "What about you? Any family you can call?" Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "My parents died when I was in college, car accident too, no siblings." She didn't mention Derek's systematic campaign to isolate her from friends, how he had slowly convinced her that everyone in her life was trying to turn her against him. "I'm sorry, that's tough." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kitchen filled with the soft sounds of cutlery against ceramic and the tick of an old clock on the wall. Emma found herself relaxing despite her natural wariness, lulled by the domestic normalcy of sharing a meal with someone who didn't expect anything from her except conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said eventually. Emma tensed. "I suppose. The person who did that to your face, are they likely to come looking for you?" The direct question hit Emma like a physical blow. She set down her spoon with shaking hands. "I don't know, maybe. She struggled to find words that could encompass Derek's possessiveness, his rage when he didn't get his way. "He doesn't like it when people take things that belong to him." "You don't belong to anyone," Marcus said quietly, but with absolute certainty. Emma looked up at him, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. He would disagree. "Then he's wrong." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "I don't know what your situation is and you don't have to tell me anything you're not comfortable sharing, but I want you to understand something. No one has the right to put their hands on you in anger, ever, for any reason." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks before she could stop them. She had heard those words before from counselors and hotline volunteers, but hearing them from Marcus, delivered with such quiet conviction in the safety of his kitchen, made them feel true for the first time. "I know that," she whispered. "Intellectually, I know that. But when you live with someone who tells you every day that you deserve whatever happens to you, that you bring it on yourself, that no one else would ever want you," she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, "after a while you start to believe it." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother used to say something similar. My father wasn't a kind man, especially when he'd been drinking. She stayed with him for years because she thought she didn't deserve better." "What happened to her?" "She finally left when I was 10, took me with her. Moved in with my grandparents here on the ranch. Best decision she ever made." Marcus's eyes met hers across the table. "It wasn't easy. She was scared every day that he'd find us, hurt us for leaving. But my grandfather was like you. He saw someone who needed help and didn't ask questions. Just opened his door and said she was welcome to stay as long as she needed." Emma felt a flutter of something that might have been recognition. "And did he? Your father, I mean, did he come looking?" "Once my grandfather met him at the gate with a shotgun and a very clear message about what would happen if he ever set foot on this property again." Marcus smiled grimly. "Sometimes bullies need to understand that their victims have people willing to stand up for them." The implication hung in the air between them. Emma wanted to ask if he meant what she thought he meant, but the question felt too enormous, too dangerous. Instead she focused on finishing her stew, her mind racing with possibilities she didn't dare fully examine. After dinner, Marcus insisted on washing the dishes while Emma sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket he had retrieved from the linen closet. The night air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and stars were beginning to emerge in the clear mountain sky. She couldn't remember the last time she had simply sat and watched the world grow dark, without fear of what the darkness might bring. Marcus joined her after a while, settling into the chair beside hers with a steaming mug of coffee. "Beautiful night," he commented. "It is." Emma pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. "I'd forgotten how quiet it could be. In the city there's always noise, traffic, sirens, people shouting. I thought I liked it, the energy and excitement. But this," she gestured at the peaceful valley spread out below them. "This is nice. You're from the city, Phoenix, born and raised." Emma hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing basic information. "I was a teacher before I got married, 3rd grade. I loved it." "Was?" Emma's smile faltered. "Derek didn't think it was appropriate for his wife to work. He said he made enough money that I didn't need to. that my job was to take care of our home. She laughed bitterly. What he really meant was that he wanted to control every aspect of my life, including my access to money and other people. Marcus said nothing, but Emma could feel his attention, the way he was listening without judgment or the need to immediately offer solutions. It was so different from the conversation she'd had with Derek, where every word was scrutinized for hidden meanings or perceived slights. I miss teaching, she continued. I miss the kids, their enthusiasm for learning, the way they would light up when they finally understood something difficult. I was good at it too. Really good. I bet you were. Marcus's voice was warm with genuine belief. What grade did you teach? Third. 8 and 9-year-olds. They're at this amazing age where they're starting to think critically but still have that wonderful curiosity about everything. Emma's face softened with memory. I had this one student, Jamie, who struggled with reading. His previous teachers thought he might have a learning disability, but I could tell he was bright. He just needed a different approach. What did you do? I started incorporating his interests into the lessons. He was obsessed with dinosaurs, so I found books about paleontology, had him write stories about fossil discoveries, even did math problems using dinosaur statistics. Emma's smile was genuine now, the first truly happy expression Marcus had seen from her. By the end of the year he was reading at grade level. His mother cried at the parent-teacher conference. That's incredible. It was the best job I ever had. Derek said it was a waste of my potential, that anyone could babysit a bunch of kids for 8 hours a day. But he was wrong. Teaching isn't babysitting. It's about seeing the potential in every child and helping them discover it themselves. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like he was threatened by your success. Emma looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Men who need to control their partners are usually afraid of something. Maybe he was worried that if you remembered how capable and talented you were, you might realize you didn't need him. The observation hit Emma like a revelation. She had never thought about Derek's behavior in those terms, but it made a painful kind of sense. The more successful she became in her career, the more critical he became of her work. The more her students and their parents praised her efforts, the more he diminished her achievements at home. He used to say that I cared more about other people's children than I did about him, she said slowly. That I was selfish for wanting to work when he needed me at home. What did he need you for? Emma considered the question seriously. I don't know. He worked long hours as a financial advisor, came home expecting dinner on the table in a clean house. But mostly I think he needed an audience, someone to validate his opinions and agree with everything he said. That's not a partnership, that's ownership. The word struck Emma like a physical blow because it was so accurate. Derek hadn't seen her as an equal partner in their marriage, but as something he possessed, like his car or his expensive watch. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma found herself studying Marcus's profile in the dim porch light, noting the way his jaw tightened when she talked about Derek's treatment of her. There was anger there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Not anger at her, she realized, but anger on her behalf. It was a foreign concept, someone being angry about injustice done to her rather than angry at her for somehow causing it. Can I ask you something now? Emma said eventually. Of course, why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me, about my situation. I could be lying about everything. Marcus turned to look at her directly. You could be, but you're not. How can you be so sure? He was quiet for a long moment, seemingly weighing his words carefully. Because I've seen real victims and I've seen people playing victim, and there's a difference. Real victims apologize for everything, even things that aren't their fault. They make themselves small, try not to take up space or cause trouble. They're grateful for basic human kindness because they're not used to receiving it. He paused. You've done all of those things since you arrived here. Emma felt exposed, as if Marcus could see straight through to her damaged core. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm telling the truth about everything. No, but it means you're someone who's been hurt badly enough to develop those responses as survival mechanisms, and regardless of the specific details, that kind of hurt deserves compassion. His simple acceptance of her pain, without needing to know all the details or assign blame, was overwhelming. Emma had spent so long being interrogated about her actions, having her motives questioned and her memory disputed, that Marcus's unconditional support felt almost too good to be true. I should probably get some sleep, she said, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the conversation. Of course, let me know if you need anything during the night, extra blankets, water, whatever. The guest room door locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer. Emma stood on shaky legs, the blanket wrapped around her like armor. Marcus, thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't need to repay anything, just focus on healing and figuring out what you want to do next. The rest will work itself out. As Emma made her way to the guest room, she heard Marcus moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of someone securing a house for the night. She had forgotten what it felt like to be in a home where those sounds represented safety rather than the calm before a storm. The guest room was exactly as Marcus had left it, welcoming and peaceful. Emma locked the door as he had suggested, not because she didn't trust him but because the ability to control her own security felt like a luxury she hadn't enjoyed in years. She pulled back the quilt and slipped between sheets that smelled of lavender and sunshine, her body sinking into a mattress that didn't bear the weight of terrible memories. For the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to truly relax. Her breathing deepened, her muscles unclenched, and slowly, carefully, she began to believe that she might actually be safe. But even as sleep claimed her, a part of her mind remained vigilant, listening for the sound of Derek's truck in the driveway, waiting for the inevitable moment when her brief respite would end and the nightmare would resume. Because deep down, despite Marcus's kindness and the sanctuary of Copper Creek Ranch, Emma wasn't sure she would ever be truly free. Outside her window, Marcus sat on the porch long into the night, his own sleep eluding him as he processed the evening's revelations. He had meant what he said about helping her without expecting anything in return, but he couldn't shake the protective instinct that had awakened the moment he saw her battered face at his gate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions about what came next. But tonight, Emma was safe under his roof, and that was enough. It had to be enough, because some things in life were worth protecting, and sometimes the most important thing you could offer another human being was the simple promise that they didn't have to face their demons alone. Emma woke to the unfamiliar sound of roosters crowing and cattle moving across distant pastures. For a moment, panic seized her as she struggled to remember where she was, her body tensing for the familiar weight of Derek's arm across her chest or the sound of his heavy breathing beside her. Instead, she found herself alone in a sun-drenched room with yellow curtains dancing in a morning breeze that carried the scent of hay and wild flowers. The relief was so profound she nearly wept. She lay still for several minutes, cataloging the absence of fear. No footsteps in the hallway that might signal Derek's approach, no need to gauge his mood by the heaviness of his tread or the way he opened doors. Just the peaceful sounds of a working ranch and the distant clatter of pans in what she assumed was the kitchen. When she finally ventured out, she found Marcus at the stove, flipping pancakes with the easy competence of someone comfortable in his own space. He looked up when she appeared, taking in her rumpled borrowed clothes and sleep-tousled hair without comment. "Morning," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Hope you slept well, better than I have in months," Emma admitted, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. The ceramic was warm against her palms, and the coffee was strong and black, exactly what she needed to fully wake up.
Hungry. I made enough for an army out of habit. Living alone doesn't seem to cure you of cooking for a crowd. Emma's stomach responded with an audible growl, making her blush. "I guess I am. Thank you." Marcus plated several pancakes alongside scrambled eggs and crispy bacon, setting the full plate in front of her before serving himself a more modest portion. Emma ate with the focused intensity of someone making up for lost meals, while Marcus pretended not to notice her ravenous appetite. "What do you usually do during the day?" Emma asked between bites. "On the ranch, depends on the season. Right now I'm preparing for winter, moving cattle to lower pastures, checking fences, stocking feed. There's always something that needs fixing or tending." Marcus gestured toward the window where several horses grazed in a nearby paddock. "Those horses need their hooves trimmed, and I've got a water pump that's been acting up for weeks." Emma followed his gaze to the horses, noting the way they moved with easy grace across the grass. "They're beautiful. Do you ride them all?" "Most of them. The paint mare there, Rosie, is getting on in years, but she's steady and calm. Good for nervous riders or anyone who needs to build confidence." Marcus glanced at her sideways. "You ever been on a horse?" "A few times as a kid at summer camps. I remember loving it, the feeling of freedom." Emma's expression grew wistful. "Derek said it was too dangerous, that I might get hurt and he'd have to deal with the consequences." The casual mention of Derek's controlling behavior hung in the air between them. Marcus set down his fork with deliberate care. "Horses can sense fear, but they can also sense trust. Sometimes being around them helps people remember what it feels like to make their own choices about what's safe and what isn't." Emma understood the deeper meaning behind his words. "Are you offering to let me ride?" "I'm offering to let you decide if you want to."
No pressure either way. The simple act of being given a choice of having her autonomy respected was so foreign that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting Marcus to think she was some fragile creature who cried at every kindness. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "If you don't think I'd be too much trouble." "No trouble at all, but first I need to check on the water pump. You're welcome to come along if you want, or you can explore the property on your own. Whatever feels right to you." Emma chose to accompany him, curious about the rhythms of ranch life and reluctant to be alone with her thoughts. They walked across the property together, Marcus pointing out various buildings and explaining their functions. The morning air was crisp and clean, so different from the smoggy heat of Phoenix that Emma felt like she was breathing clearly for the first time in years. The malfunctioning pump was located near a creek that wound through the property, its clear water gurgling over smooth stones worn by decades of flow. Marcus knelt beside the mechanical housing, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he diagnosed the problem. "Looks like the seals are shot," he muttered, more to himself than to Emma. "I'll need to drive into town for parts." "How far is town?" Emma asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of her voice. The thought of being alone, even on this peaceful ranch, made her stomach clench with familiar dread. "About 20 miles. Take me a couple hours round trip." Marcus looked up at her, reading the tension in her posture. "You're welcome to come with me if you'd like. Might be good for you to see that there's a whole world out here that doesn't know or care about your past." Emma considered this. The idea of venturing into public with her bruised face made her cringe, but staying alone felt worse. "Would that be okay? I don't want to be in the way." "You wouldn't be. Besides, Clara down at the hardware store makes the best apple pie this side of Denver. Might be worth the trip just for that." They drove to town in Marcus's well-maintained pickup truck, the radio playing softly between them as they wound through mountain roads lined with aspens just beginning to turn gold. Emma kept her face turned toward the window, mesmerized by the landscape rolling past. She had lived her entire life in cities, surrounded by concrete and traffic. This vast expanse of sky and mountains made her feel simultaneously insignificant and infinite. Cedar Falls was the kind of small town that existed in postcards, a main street lined with locally owned shops, American flags hanging from every streetlight, and the sense that everyone knew everyone else's business. Emma instinctively pulled the hood of her borrowed sweatshirt up as they parked, trying to hide the worst of the bruising around her eye. Marcus pretended not to notice her self-consciousness, leading her into the hardware store with the casual confidence of someone who belonged. A plump woman with silver hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the counter, her face brightening when she saw Marcus. "Well, if it isn't our favorite hermit," Clara teased. "What brings you to town on a weekday?" "Water pump gave up the ghost," Marcus replied, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "Need some seals and gaskets. Hopefully you've got them in stock." Clara's gaze shifted to Emma, taking in her appearance with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen enough of life to recognize trouble when it walked through her door. But instead of prying questions or uncomfortable stares, she simply smiled warmly. "You must be visiting Copper Creek," she said to Emma. "I'm Clara Hoffman. My family's owned this place for 40 years. "Emma," she replied softly, grateful that Clara didn't seem to expect a last name or explanations. "Marcus, you take this young lady over to the diner and get her some of Betty's famous chicken and dumplings while I gather up these parts," Clara instructed. "Tell Betty I said to make sure you get extra biscuits." The diner was a cozy establishment with red vinyl booths and the kind of atmosphere that spoke of countless conversations over coffee and pie. Betty turned out to be a woman in her 60s with laugh lines and flour-dusted apron, who took one look at Emma and somehow managed to convey both maternal concern and respectful distance. Emma found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. The people here weren't pushy or demanding. They seemed to understand that sometimes folks needed space to heal, and they offered their kindness without expectation of reciprocation. "This is really good," Emma said, savoring a spoonful of the rich hearty dumplings. "I haven't had comfort food like this since I was a child." "Betty's been perfecting that recipe for decades," Marcus said. "My grandmother used to say that food cooked with love tastes different from food cooked out of obligation." Emma thought about the meals she had prepared for Derek, carefully timed to be ready exactly when he walked through the door, seasoned precisely to his preferences, served with the desperate hope that everything would be perfect enough to keep him calm. Food as appeasement rather than nourishment. "What was your grandmother like?" she asked, genuinely curious. Marcus's expression softened. "Tough as leather but gentle as rain. She could birth a calf, mend a fence, and bake a birthday cake all in the same day. Never complained about the hard work, never made anyone feel like they were a burden." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. She had this saying, "Every living thing deserves to feel safe and valued." Applied it to everything, animals, people, even the plants in her garden. "She sounds wonderful. She probably would have liked you." Marcus met Emma's eyes across the table. She always had a soft spot for anyone who was trying to start over. The comment was casual, but Emma heard the deeper message. Marcus wasn't just offering her temporary shelter, he was suggesting that starting over was possible, that her current situation wasn't permanent or defining. After lunch they returned to Clara's shop to collect the pump parts. Clara had wrapped up some homemade cookies along with the mechanical supplies, pressing the package into Emma's hands with the kind of maternal authority that brooked no argument. For later she said with a wink, "Marcus tends to forget that humans need more than beef jerky and coffee to survive." "I eat plenty of real food," Marcus protested, but he was smiling. "Canned soup and frozen dinners don't count as real food," Clara retorted.
This girl looks like she could use some proper cooking. Maybe having her around will inspire you to use that kitchen for something other than heating up leftovers. Emma felt her cheeks warm at the implication that she might be staying long enough to influence Marcus's eating habits. She hadn't allowed herself to think beyond the next few days, too afraid to hope for anything more permanent. On the drive back to the ranch, Emma found herself studying Marcus's profile as he navigated the winding mountain roads. He was handsome in an understated way, with strong hands and an easy confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he stood for. So different from Derek, who demanded attention and validation at every turn. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, noticing her scrutiny. "Just wondering why you're not married," Emma said, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "It's okay, fair question." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I was engaged once about 5 years ago. Lisa was a teacher in town, smart and pretty and everything I thought I wanted. What happened? She wanted me to sell the ranch, move to Denver where she could advance her career. Said ranching was a dead end, that I was wasting my education and potential by staying in the middle of nowhere." Marcus's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I realized we had very different ideas about what makes a life worth living." Emma absorbed this information, thinking about her own abandoned teaching career and Derek's insistence that she give up work to focus on their marriage. "Do you ever regret choosing the ranch over her?" "No, the ranch isn't just where I live, it's who I am. I couldn't be the person she wanted me to become without losing the parts of myself that I value most." Marcus glanced at her. "What about you? Any regrets about the choices you've made?" Emma considered this carefully. "I regret staying as long as I did. I regret believing Derek when he told me I was lucky anyone would want me. I regret giving up teaching." She paused. "But I don't regret leaving, even if I have no idea what comes next." "Not knowing what comes next isn't the same as not having options," Marcus said gently. "Sometimes the biggest step toward freedom is admitting that you don't have to have everything figured out right now." They spent the afternoon working on the water pump together, Emma handing Marcus tools and watching as he patiently explained what he was doing. She found herself genuinely interested in the mechanical process, enjoying the satisfaction of solving a concrete problem with her hands. "You're good at this," Marcus observed as Emma successfully threaded a stubborn gasket into place. "Ever done mechanical work before?" "Not really, but I like puzzles, figuring out how things fit together, what's causing problems." Emma smiled. "I guess that's part of what drew me to teaching. Every student is a puzzle, and finding the right approach is like discovering the missing piece." "Makes sense. Teaching and ranching aren't that different when you think about it. Both require patience, problem solving, and the ability to work with living things that don't always cooperate." Emma had never thought of it that way, but Marcus was right. There was something deeply satisfying about both endeavors, a sense of nurturing growth and potential. When the pump was finally working properly, Marcus suggested they take that promised ride. Emma's nervousness returned as they approached the horses, but Rosie seemed to sense her anxiety and stood perfectly still while Marcus showed Emma how to brush her coat and check her hooves. "She's so calm," Emma marveled,
running her hands over the mare's soft neck. "I expected her to be skittish around strangers. Horses are like people, they respond to genuine intentions. Rosie can tell you're not trying to hurt or control her, just connect with her." Marcus adjusted the saddle with practiced ease. "She's been a good teacher for a lot of nervous riders over the years." Emma's first few minutes in the saddle were tense and awkward, but gradually she began to relax into the rhythm of Rosie's gentle gait. Marcus walked alongside them, offering quiet and even gentle corrections to her posture. "How does it feel?" he asked as they circled the paddock for the third time. "Like flying," Emma said, surprised by her own response. "Like I'm in control but also part of something bigger than myself." "That's exactly right. Want to try going a little faster?" Emma nodded, and Marcus clicked his tongue softly. Rosie transitioned into a smooth trot that initially jarred Emma's teeth, but gradually became a comfortable bounce as she learned to move with the horse rather than against her. When they finally dismounted, Emma's legs were shaky but her smile was radiant. "Thank you. I had forgotten what it felt like to do something just because I wanted to, not because someone expected it of me." "You can ride whenever you want," Marcus said, leading Rosie back to the barn. "She could use the exercise, and you look natural up there." That evening, they shared another quiet dinner on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains. Emma found herself talking more freely than she had in years, sharing memories of her students and her love of literature, her dreams of maybe someday writing children's books. "You should," Marcus said when she mentioned the writing idea tentatively, as if it were foolish to even consider. "The world needs more books written by people who actually understand children." "Derek always said creative pursuits were self-indulgent wastes of time," Emma said, then caught herself. "Sorry, I keep bringing him up." "Don't apologize, he was a part of your life for years. It makes sense that you'd reference those experiences." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face in the fading light. "But maybe instead of thinking about what he said you couldn't do, you could start thinking about what you want to do." Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering this radical shift in perspective. For so long, her days had been structured around avoiding Derek's displeasure, anticipating his needs, managing his moods. The idea of making choices based on her own desires rather than someone else's expectations was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I think I'd like to stay here a little longer," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "If that's okay with you, just until I figure out my next steps." Marcus nodded as if he had been expecting this request. "Stay as long as you need. I meant what I said about not expecting anything in return, but if you want to help around the ranch, I wouldn't say no to an extra pair of hands." "I'd like that. I want to earn my keep, not just hide here." "You're not hiding, you're healing. There's a difference." Emma felt tears threaten again at his simple acceptance, his refusal to judge her for needing time and space to recover from Derek's systematic destruction of her confidence and independence. That night, as she prepared for bed in what was beginning to feel like her own room, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond mere survival. Maybe she could rebuild her teaching credentials, find work in Cedar Falls or a nearby town. Maybe she could write those children's books she had dreamed about. Maybe she could learn to trust her own judgment again, make decisions based on hope rather than fear. For the first time since arriving at Copper Creek Ranch, Emma fell asleep without listening for the sound of Derek's truck in the driveway. Instead, she drifted off to the peaceful sounds of the ranch at night, wind in the trees, the distant lowing of cattle, the comforting knowledge that Marcus was nearby if she needed him. Outside, Marcus sat on the porch long after Emma had retired, his phone in his hand as he debated whether to make a call. Clara had mentioned seeing a man asking questions around town that afternoon, someone who didn't look like he belonged, and who seemed particularly interested in anyone matching Emma's description. Marcus hadn't wanted to worry Emma with this information, especially not when she was finally beginning to relax and heal, but he also knew that her peace of mind was fragile, built on the assumption that Derek didn't know where she was. If someone was looking for her, Marcus needed to be prepared. He thought about his grandfather's old shotgun in the hall closet, about the isolation of the ranch that could be either protection or vulnerability, depending on the circumstances. Tomorrow, he decided, he would drive back to town and have a more detailed conversation with Clara about exactly what kind of questions this stranger had been asking. Tonight, he would simply keep watch and make sure Emma's first real taste of safety remained uninterrupted. Because some promises, once made, were sacred. And Marcus had promised Emma that she was safe at Copper Creek Ranch, a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost him. The third week at Copper Creek Ranch brought an unexpected visitor to Emma's healing sanctuary. She was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, enjoying the simple domestic task and the way the mountain air made everything smell clean and fresh, when she heard the rumble of an unfamiliar engine in the driveway. Marcus emerged from the barn, his posture immediately alert as a sleek black sedan pulled up near the main house. Emma's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She recognized that car had sat in its passenger seat countless times while Derek lectured her about proper behavior or berated her for imagined slights. Derek stepped out of the vehicle with the confident swagger that had once charmed her and later terrified her. He was dressed in his expensive business suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile predatory as his eyes swept the ranch until they found her standing frozen by the clothesline. "There's my beautiful wife," he called out, his voice carrying the false warmth he used in public. "I've been so worried about you, darling. When you disappeared without a word, I thought something terrible had happened." Emma's hands shook as she gripped the laundry basket, her carefully rebuilt sense of safety crumbling in seconds. She wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the mountains where Derek could never find her. But her legs refused to move, paralyzed by the familiar terror of his presence. Marcus positioned himself between Derek and Emma, his stance casual but unmistakably protective. "You're on private property," he said calmly. "State your business or leave." Derek's smile widened, revealing teeth that were too white and too perfect. "My business is with my wife." "Emma, sweetheart, pack your things. We're going home." "She's not going anywhere with you," Marcus replied, his voice steady but with an undertone of steel that Emma had never heard before. Derek laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. "And who exactly are you to make that decision?" "Some backwoods cowboy who thinks he can play knight in shining armor." His gaze shifted to Emma, and she saw the cold fury beneath his charming facade. "Emma knows where she belongs, don't you, darling?" Emma found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I'm not coming back, Derek." "Of course you are. You're confused, probably suffering from some kind of breakdown. It happens to women your age." Derek took a step toward her, but Marcus moved to block his path. "Sir, I appreciate you taking care of my wife during her little episode, but I'll handle things from here." "Your wife filed for separation 3 weeks ago," Marcus said, producing an envelope from his shirt pocket. "Her lawyer delivered these papers this morning." Emma's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't filed any papers, hadn't even spoken to a lawyer. But Marcus's confidence was so complete that Derek actually paused, his certainty wavering. Derek's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the rage that lurked beneath his polished exterior. "Separation papers? Emma, what games are you playing? You know you can't survive without me. You have no money, no job, no skills. You're nothing without me." The familiar litany of her worthlessness washed over Emma like poison, each word designed to strip away what little confidence she had rebuilt. For a moment she felt herself shrinking back into the frightened dependent woman she had been. But then she caught sight of Marcus's steady presence beside her, remembered the pride in his voice when he praised her mechanical skills, her way with the horses, her intelligence. "I'm not nothing," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "I'm a teacher, I'm good with animals, I can fix water pumps and ride horses and make people feel safe. I'm not the broken person you convinced me I was." Derek's face darkened with genuine anger now. "You ungrateful little—" He lunged toward Emma, but Marcus intercepted him smoothly, catching Derek's wrist in a grip that made the other man wince. "I suggest you get back in your car and leave," Marcus said quietly, "before this situation escalates beyond words." Derek jerked his hand free, his composure completely shattered now. "You think you can steal my wife? You think some pathetic ranch hand can compete with what I can offer her? I own a house worth $500,000. I make more money in a month than you see in a year." "Money can't buy respect," Marcus replied. "And it sure can't buy love." "Love?" Derek spat. "She doesn't know what love is. She's a damaged, needy woman who latches on to whoever shows her attention. Is that what you want? A broken toy that someone else threw away?" Emma flinched at the cruel description, but Marcus's expression never changed. "What I see is a strong, intelligent woman who had the courage to leave an abusive situation and start rebuilding her life. That takes more strength than you'll ever possess." Derek's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Strength? She used to call me crying from work because she couldn't handle a classroom of 8-year-olds. She had panic attacks when I was 5 minutes late coming home because she was terrified of being alone. She's weak, pathetic, and you're deluding yourself if you think otherwise. Each accusation hit Emma like a physical blow, because they contained just enough truth to hurt. She had struggled with anxiety during her marriage, had called Derek for reassurance when she felt overwhelmed. But standing here now, she could see how Derek had systematically created and fed those fears, making her doubt herself until she became dependent on his approval. The only thing pathetic here is a man who has to tear down his wife to feel powerful, Marcus said. Emma doesn't need your permission to leave, and she doesn't owe you an explanation for choosing a better life. Derek's eyes narrowed as he looked between Marcus and Emma, calculating his next move. Fine, you want to play house with this nobody. Go ahead. But when you come crawling back, and you will, because you always do, don't expect me to welcome you with open arms. I'll have moved on to someone younger, prettier, and less damaged. He turned to go, then paused at his car door. Oh, and Emma, you might want to ask your new boyfriend about his first wife. Ask him how she really died and whether he's told you the truth about why he lives alone on this god-forsaken ranch. The words hung in the air like poison as Derek drove away, leaving nothing but dust and the acrid smell of expensive cologne. Emma stood trembling in the sudden silence, Derek's final accusation echoing in her mind. She turned to Marcus, searching his face for answers, but found only carefully controlled pain. Marcus, she whispered. What was he talking about? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the spot where Derek's car had disappeared. We should go inside, he said finally. This conversation requires coffee and somewhere comfortable to sit. Emma followed him into the kitchen on unsteady legs, her mind reeling from the confrontation and its aftermath. Marcus moved with deliberate calm as he prepared coffee, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the mugs just a little too tightly. I wasn't married, Marcus said when they were both seated at the kitchen table, but I was engaged to someone before Lisa. Her name was Jennifer, and she died in a car accident 6 years ago. Emma waited, sensing there was more to the story. We had a fight the night she died, a stupid pointless argument about wedding plans and money and all the things that seem so important until they're not. Marcus stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers. She stormed out, said she needed space to think. I was too proud and angry to go after her. What happened? She was driving too fast on mountain roads in bad weather. Lost control on a curve about 10 miles from here. The sheriff said she died on impact, that she wouldn't have suffered. Marcus's voice was carefully controlled, but Emma could hear the guilt that still haunted him. If I hadn't been so stubborn, if I'd gone after her or convinced her to stay until morning. It wasn't your fault, Emma said softly. Accidents happen. Bad weather, dangerous roads, those aren't things you could have controlled. Maybe not, but I could have controlled my pride. My need to be right. I could have put her safety above my ego. Marcus looked up at Emma, his eyes filled with old pain. Derek was partly right about one thing. I do live alone on this ranch, because I couldn't save someone I cared about, and I've been telling myself for 6 years that it's safer to keep people at a distance. Emma felt her heart break a little for the man who had shown her such kindness while carrying his own burden of guilt and loss. But you didn't keep me at a distance. You let me stay, helped me heal. Because you needed help and I couldn't stand by and do nothing. But Emma, Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I need you to understand that Derek isn't wrong about me being damaged too. I have my own ghosts, my own fears about getting close to people again. Emma squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from years of ranch work, the strength that had stood between her and Derek's rage. We're all damaged in some way. The question is whether we let that damage define us, or whether we choose to heal together. Marcus studied her face, seeing something that made his expression soften. When Derek showed up today, my first thought wasn't about my own safety or convenience. It was about protecting you, making sure he couldn't hurt you again. That scared me more than I care to admit. Why? Because caring about someone means being vulnerable to losing them, and I'm not sure I'm brave enough to risk that kind of pain again. Emma understood the fear he was describing because she lived with her own version of it every day. The fear of trusting someone enough to be hurt by them, of believing in happiness only to have it snatched away. Derek said I would come crawling back, she said quietly. For a moment when he was standing there looking so confident and successful, I almost believed him. I almost thought he was right about me being weak and damaged and unworthy of anything better.
But you didn't go with him. No, because for the first time in years, I remembered who I used to be before Derek convinced me I was nothing. I remembered that I'm capable of making my own choices, even when they're scary. Emma met Marcus's eyes across the table. I'm choosing to stay here, to keep healing, to keep learning who Emma Rodriguez really is underneath all the fear and damage. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. And if I asked you to leave, if I told you that Derek's visit reminded me why it's safer to live alone, Emma felt her heart clench at the possibility, but she forced herself to consider it honestly. I'd be heartbroken, but I'd respect your decision, because that's what people who care about each other do. They respect each other's choices even when those choices hurt. That's not what Derek would do. No, Derek would manipulate, threaten, and try to force you to change your mind. He'd tell you that you were making a mistake, that you needed him to make decisions for you. Emma's voice grew stronger as she spoke. But I'm not Derek, and I won't use love as a weapon the way he did. Marcus lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking if you're sure you want to stay, knowing that I'm just as scared and damaged as you are. Emma smiled through the tears that had gathered in her eyes. I think scared and damaged people might be exactly what each other needs. We understand what it's like to be afraid, to carry guilt and pain. Maybe that understanding can help us be gentler with each other than we've been with ourselves. Derek will probably be back, Marcus warned. Men like him don't give up easily when they lose control of something they consider theirs. Let him come. I'm not the same woman who left Phoenix 3 weeks ago. I'm stronger now, clearer about what I will and won't accept in my life. Emma's voice carried a conviction that surprised even her. And I'm not facing him alone anymore. Marcus squeezed her hand. No, you're not. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it together. As the sun set over Copper Creek Ranch that evening, Emma and Marcus sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. The peaceful quiet that had been shattered by Derek's arrival was slowly returning, but both of them knew their sanctuary had been breached. Thank you, Emma said softly, for standing up to him, for protecting me, for not letting his lies about you change how I see you. Thank you for choosing to stay, despite learning about my past. Despite knowing that being with me means dealing with my fears and guilt along with your own. Emma leaned against Marcus's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her in a gesture of comfort and protection that felt entirely different from Derek's possessive embraces. This felt like partnership, like two people choosing to face the world together, rather than one person dominating the other. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something, Emma said. These 3 weeks at Copper Creek have given me back pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. You helped me remember that I'm worth protecting, worth caring about, worth fighting for. Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You helped me remember that isolation isn't the same as safety, that protecting your heart by never opening it isn't really living at all. Above them the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggles and fears but somehow comforting in their permanence. Emma closed her eyes and let herself imagine a future where Derek's threats were just unpleasant memories, where she and Marcus could build something real and lasting together. It might not be easy, but for the first time in years, Emma believed it was possible, and that belief felt like the strongest foundation they could ask for. 2 months later, Emma stood in the morning sunlight, streaming through the kitchen windows, flour dusting her hands as she rolled out pie crust for the apple pies she was making for the Cedar Falls Autumn Festival. The bruises on her face had long since faded, replaced by a healthy glow that came from working outdoors and sleeping peacefully through the night. Marcus entered the kitchen carrying fresh eggs from the henhouse, pausing to watch her work with the same concentration she brought to everything she touched. The transformation in Emma over the past weeks had been remarkable. The frightened, broken woman who had stumbled onto his ranch had evolved into someone confident and capable, her laughter now filling the spaces that had been silent for too long. Those look professional, Marcus commented, admiring the perfectly crimped edges of her pie crusts. My grandmother taught me before she died. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed baking until I had a kitchen where I felt safe to experiment. Emma's smile was radiant as she slid the pies into the oven. Mrs. Henderson says the festival committee is hoping to raise enough money to renovate the school library. I want to help. Speaking of helping, I got a call from Principal Morrison yesterday. The substitute teacher position opened up permanently if you're interested. Emma's face lit up with excitement before a shadow of uncertainty crossed her features. Do you think I'm ready?
It's been almost 2 years since I was in a classroom. I think you're more ready than you know. Those kids would be lucky to have you. Marcus pulled her into his arms, marveling at how naturally she melted against him now, no longer flinching from unexpected touch, but only if it's what you want. No pressure. It is what I want. I miss teaching, miss being around children and their endless curiosity about everything. Emma looked up at him with eyes that sparkled with possibility. I feel like I'm finally remembering who I used to be, but also discovering who I'm becoming. Marcus kissed her forehead gently. I love who you're becoming too. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching fast on the gravel drive. Marcus tensed immediately, his protective instincts still sharp even though Derek hadn't been seen since his confrontation months ago. But instead of the sleek black sedan they both dreaded, Clara's familiar pickup truck came into view. Clara climbed out with unusual urgency, her expression grim as she approached the porch where Marcus and Emma had emerged to greet her.
We need to talk.
Clara said without preamble. Derek Rodriguez was back in town yesterday, asking more questions. This time he wasn't alone. Emma felt the familiar chill of fear, but it was different now, less paralyzing, more like the alertness that comes with knowing you're strong enough to face whatever comes. What kind of questions? Marcus asked, his arm automatically moving around Emma's shoulders. He brought some fancy lawyer with him, trying to claim Emma took money that belonged to him when she left. Complete nonsense, but they were making noise about having her arrested for theft. Clara's eyes flashed with indignation. Sheriff Patterson told them to produce evidence or stop wasting his time, but Derek seemed confident he could manufacture what he needed. Emma's stomach twisted. Derek had always been skilled at manipulating situations to his advantage, using his charm and connections to get what he wanted. He's not going to give up. He sees me as something he owns, and he can't accept that I chose to leave. There's more, Clara continued. I heard from my sister in Phoenix that Derek's been telling people you had a mental breakdown, that you're not competent to make your own decisions. He's building a case to have you declared unfit and brought back under some kind of guardianship. The words hit Emma like physical blows. Derek's strategy was diabolically clever, using her own past struggles with anxiety against her, twisting her escape into evidence of instability. That's ridiculous, Marcus said firmly. Anyone who knows Emma can see she's completely rational and capable, but the people making those decisions don't know me. Emma realized, her voice quiet with growing understanding. They'll only hear Derek's version, see his respectable job and expensive suits, and assume he must be the reasonable one. We won't let that happen, Marcus said with fierce determination. There has to be something we can do. Clara smiled grimly. Actually there is. Sheriff Patterson suggested you might want to talk to Judge Harrison. She's handled domestic violence cases for 20 years, and she doesn't have much patience for controlling husbands who won't let go. What good would that do? Emma asked. Restraining order for starters. Documentation of Derek's harassment and threats. If he's planning to challenge your mental competency, we need to get ahead of him with evidence of his pattern of abuse and manipulation. Emma felt a familiar flutter of panic at the thought of facing Derek in a courtroom, of having her most painful and private experiences dissected by strangers. But the fear was tempered now by something stronger, the knowledge that she wasn't facing this alone. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll talk to Judge Harrison, file whatever papers we need to file. Derek doesn't get to rewrite history just because he's angry that I found the courage to leave. Marcus squeezed her hand. We'll face this together, whatever comes. Actually, Clara said with a mysterious smile, you might have more allies than you think. Betty at the diner has been asking around about Derek's visit, and apparently several people remember him from when he was in town before. The way he talked to service workers, the way he treated you when you were with him. Small towns have long memories for people who show their true character. 3 days later, Emma sat in Judge Harrison's chambers, her hands folded calmly in her lap as she recounted the years of psychological and physical abuse that had defined her marriage to Derek. The judge was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and kind but sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Rodriguez, Judge Harrison said when Emma finished her account, what you've described constitutes a clear pattern of domestic violence and coercive control. I'm prepared to grant an immediate restraining order preventing your estranged husband from contacting you or coming within 500 yards of your current residence. Thank you, Your Honor. However, I want you to understand that this is likely just the beginning. Men like Derek Rodriguez don't typically accept legal boundaries any more readily than they accept personal ones. Judge Harrison leaned forward, her expression serious. Are you prepared for the possibility that he might escalate his behavior?
Emma thought about the woman she had been when she first arrived at Copper Creek Ranch, broken and terrified, believing Derek's lies about her worthlessness. Then she thought about who she had become, someone who could fix machinery, calm frightened horses, and stand up to bullies. I'm prepared, Your Honor. I have people who support me now, and I'm not the same person who was too scared to fight back. Judge Harrison smiled approvingly. Good. I'll also be noting in the court record that you appear to be in excellent mental health and fully capable of making your own decisions. Just in case anyone tries to suggest otherwise. Emma left the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in months. The legal documentation felt like armor, proof that Derek's version of reality wasn't the only one that mattered. Marcus was waiting for her in the truck, his expression anxious until he saw her smile. How did it go? Better than I hoped. Judge Harrison saw right through Derek's manipulations. She said I seem perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Emma settled into the passenger seat, feeling like she could breathe fully for the first time in years. It's official now. Derek has no legal right to control my life anymore. Marcus pulled her close, holding her tightly as if she might disappear. I'm so proud of you. It took incredible courage to walk into that courthouse and tell your story. I had incredible motivation. I refused to let Derek's version of who I am be the final word on my life. Emma pulled back to look at Marcus directly. I want to build something real with you, something based on respect and partnership instead of fear and control. But I needed to face Derek first, to prove to myself that I'm strong enough to choose my own future. And what future are you choosing? Marcus asked softly. Emma smiled, thinking of the teaching position waiting for her, the children who would benefit from her hard-won wisdom about resilience and self-worth, the life she and Marcus were building together one day at a time. I'm choosing hope, she said simply. I'm choosing love that lifts people up instead of tearing them down. I'm choosing to believe that broken things can be healed, and that people can change and grow. She paused, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy rather than pain. I'm choosing you, Marcus Sullivan, if you'll have me. Marcus's answer was a kiss that tasted of promise and possibility, of two damaged souls who had found healing in each other's acceptance and support. 6 months later, Emma stood at the front of her third-grade classroom, watching her students work on a writing assignment about their dreams for the future. The children's faces were bright with concentration and hope, their pencils moving eagerly across the paper as they poured their hearts onto the page. Mrs. Rodriguez, a small voice called out, "How do you spell astronaut?" Emma smiled as she helped the child with the spelling, thinking about how dreams could survive even the darkest times if someone believed in them. Her own dreams had been buried for years under Derek's criticism and control, but they had survived, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. After school, she drove home to Copper Creek Ranch, where Marcus was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee and the easy smile that never failed to make her heart flutter. The ranch had become more than a refuge now, it was home in every sense of the word. "Good day," Marcus asked, pulling her into his arms as she climbed the porch steps. "Wonderful day. Sarah Martinez wrote a story about becoming a veterinarian, and Tommy Chen wants to be a teacher like me when he grows up." Emma settled beside him on the porch swing they had installed the month before. "I love watching them discover what they're capable of, helping them believe in themselves. Kind of like someone did for you," Marcus observed. Emma leaned against his shoulder, watching the horses graze peacefully in the paddock. "We did that for each other. You helped me remember my strength, and I helped you remember that love doesn't have to end in loss." Derek had never returned to Cedar Falls after the restraining order was served. Emma had heard through Clara's network that he had remarried. Finding another woman to control and manipulate, she felt sorry for his new victim, but grateful that Derek's attention had moved on to easier prey. The scars from her abusive marriage would always be part of her story, but they were no longer the only chapter. Emma had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, or pretending the damage had never happened. It was about choosing every single day to build something better on the foundation of hard-won wisdom and self-respect. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma closed her eyes and listened to the peaceful sounds of the ranch settling into evening. Marcus's arm tightened around her, and she smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, all of them faced together. The woman who had stumbled onto Copper Creek Ranch with nothing but fear and desperation was gone, replaced by someone who knew her own worth and refused to settle for anything less than she deserved. Emma Rodriguez had finally come home,
not to a place, but to herself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.